Welcome to Koffee Talks, a Pokémon card collecting podcast with Dan Norton and David Person.
Hey everyone, welcome back. It is Koffee Talks once again with myself, Dan, and of course David. David, what have you been up to this week?
Dan, do you practice that intro? Because it is so exciting. It's such a pizzazzing thing that I wasn't ready to do the podcast at all today. And once you did that, it just revs me up.
Yeah, I practice that in front of the mirror all the time.
Well, you know what, Dan? I try to teach my kids that practice makes perfect. And to me, you're just like one of those kids. So thanks for listening every once in a while. Okay, Dan, I appreciate that.
There we go. Right, now you can answer my question.
What was the question? I forgot it already.
What have you been up to this week? Anything fun?
Oh, God, Dan, I've got stories to tell. If folks don't hang on for this entire broadcast today, they are crazy because I've got some stuff that's coming out of the hopper that's unbelievable. But I think we should do that after we do the comments.
All right. Well, we'll do that after the comments. I will say, though, my big thing this week was we did a toy and game show yesterday, or 2 days ago at this point. So that was a lot of fun. Laura actually ran some tournaments at the toy and game show for the first time, where they were giving away. First prize was you got a selfie and a signature from Professor Oak's voice actor.
You know what? I've worshipped many a voice actor in my time, so that is a wonderful. Dan, does anybody want a selfie and a signature from a voice actor?
A lot of people do. A lot of people at conventions, yeah.
Okay, I love that. You know what? We like who we like, and that's great. And I've got more to talk about when it comes to your show later in our segment when we get there.
Cool. Well, for now, let's just jump into the comments.
Okay.
All right. First off, we have Steve Jackson. Just says glad to see the return.
Yeah. Thank you, Steve. We were very convinced, maybe concerned we'd never return, but Dan won't let me off the hook. So thank you.
We then have Zach K says, another great show, guys. Looking forward to more info related to obtaining cards at Worlds. Maybe a little bit longer of a wait on that one. We still do have some open-ended stuff. We want to really get everything sorted and close the book on this, and then we'll tell the story all in one go.
Yeah, and I don't know if we're going to tell the story all in one go because it may not be able to be told in one go if it takes as long as it looks like it's going to take. But I am going to allude to it later in this podcast as well. But yes, we definitely are going to fulfill that request. So thank you.
Yeah, it will be coming. Next comment is from Gerald Rowland. Just says, great episode.
You know what? Short and sweet. Nothing wrong with that, Gerald. Thank you. We appreciate it.
We then have TCG Cross Collector says, hey guys, very happy to see you back. I have a question, if it's possible. Is there any data or estimations about the vending machine sets print runs? I can't find anything relevant online. I would like to know if there's any idea how rare or not they are. Thanks for all you two do for the hobby. Have a nice day. I don't believe there's any data or information out there about the size of the print runs for the vending machine sets. And they are out there. You can definitely get them. The only things very rare about the vending machine sets or the related things are the mail-away cards, the Maisaki campaign cards. The rest of the sets, you shouldn't have too much trouble actively going and just picking them up whenever you want to. They do command a little bit of a price now because they are very popular sets, but they're basically always on the market.
And I certainly am not going to make any comments on this because it's card related. I don't know anything about the cards. It's also Japanese. I don't know anything about Japanese. So thank you for watching a podcast that has nothing to do with your question. But I will say that this person, that just put this comment in, like Cross Collector, he did just send me a picture and show me that he received the card I sent. So that was really cool. Across the world again.
I saw that on the Coffee Talks one as well. Yeah.
Yeah, number 2. So number 2 getting across the entire world on a PWE, plain white envelope. So thank you.
One thing to mention about the vending machine sets, you did mention them, being Japanese, and we've had a few of them made it across to English as promos and stuff, but not the full sets. There is a product coming out at the end of the year, which is called Pokemon Trading Card Game Classic. It's a very nice box set. It's a fixed box set. It just has some decks in it. There's no randomization. But within those decks, they're all obviously classic cards. We're getting the Mr. Mime from Vending Series first ever English printing we're going to be getting.
Dan, how do you know everything? Who are you? How are you paying people for this information, Dan? Are you like a small earthworm that has slithered into people's DMs and you're just like hacking and finding out this stuff? What's going on, Dan? Are you just making all this up?
So that they actually had a display at Worlds at the World Championships Play Lab. I didn't go through the Play Lab because the Play Lab this time was run by Creatures of Japan rather than the Pokemon Company International. So everything was done in Japanese, and they had the Japanese version of the Pokemon Trading Card Game Classic that you could play with just to see how it was. But they also had a framed English version on the wall so people could see that it was exactly the same cards coming in English. So there have been some photos of that going around.
Okay, very good. That. By the way, folks listening right now, that's the only secret Dan will reveal. We can't reveal all of our sources at this point in time.
No, obviously not.
No.
Next up, we have Your Average Player, just says, always a great show.
Yeah, and this guy's not your average player. I mean, he's so humble, and I appreciate that. When you make a comment like that, you're way more than your average player.
We have Professor Birch says, glad you fellas are back. I get headaches if I don't have my coffee in the morning.
Does Professor Birch, similar to Professor Oak, have a voiceover actor? Should we ask him? I mean, because I think it would make him even that more appealing than he is right now.
I mean, Professor Birch, the character, I'm sure does. I don't know about Professor Birch, who's leaving the comments. Probably does not have his own voice actor.
Why? This could be the character, right? We don't know. We don't know that for sure.
It could be. There is a chance that it's a fictional character from the Pokemon universe commenting on our videos. You're right.
Okay.
We don't know.
Okay, good. Yes, no, we don't.
Next up, we have our friend Matty, left a couple of comments. First of all, saying, yay, I missed these episodes a lot. Swain has finally got his pain. Please tell me his address. Influencers ruin everything as usual. Please never get to that level of self-ego, guys. Stay classy and crazy in equal measures. I can promise that we will never get to that level of ego. He says, we need a double dose of David's rant and Trainer Deck A or B next week to make up for none this week. I hate to tell you, Matty, I don't think we're having those this week because, as you can see, David is not at home, so we're doing kind of a different rushed recording while David's in a hotel room, which you'll hear a bit more about later. And Matty finally finished off with, happy 60th birthday, Steph, the wonderful, kind-hearted yin to David's crazy mental yang.
Yeah, boy, is she ever. Matty, thanks as always for all the support. We appreciate it. Yeah, so this particular podcast is going to be, again, freeform like last week. And I'm going to describe why in a moment. But I am going to say that I've had some real positive comments from the World's ones as well. I'm sure Dan is as well, since he carried that last podcast. And just because, we also try to give a certain level of informational content that at the bottom line and in and amongst our fun is relevant and informative. So I think that you'll, enjoy this one as well. And then when things get back to normal, hopefully by Sunday, hopefully in another 4 or 5 days, we'll be able to put our regular segments back in. But thank you for the kind words.
Yeah. I'm sure people will enjoy this one, even if it's different to some of the others.
Yes.
And final comment on the video is from Craig. Says, glad you got your money back, Dave. I've never been truly scammed myself. However, I have bought fake cards by mistake on eBay and had to have eBay refund me. They were mostly black and white era EX cards that for some reason I find hard to spot until they're in my hand. Not the textured secret rares, but the other non-textured EXs in the set. The amount of fake cards that people fall for on eBay, even the easy to spot ones, such as textured ones that aren't textured, is shocking. People spending a good amount of money on fakes and then leaving positive feedback after makes me so disappointed for them, as they don't even know they've been scammed. Yeah, it happens a lot. I've talked with a lot of people about this, where people have said to me, Dan, why are Pokemon fakes not getting better? Like, why are fakes so obvious? When you compare it to stuff like Magic the Gathering, when people are talking about trying to spot real Magic cards compared to fake Magic cards, it's about getting a jeweler's loop out and looking at Rosetta printings on the card under high magnification, and the fakes are getting better and better and closer to real cards. And the reason is, fake Magic cards have to try and fool Magic judges and Magic players. Fake Pokemon cards have to fool someone's grandma who's on eBay typing in Pokemon cards because they heard their grandkid likes Pokemon now. That's all it is that Pokemon fakes aren't getting better because they don't need to be, because they're not needing to actually scam or fool anyone who knows anything about Pokemon. It's the sad reality, but that is kind of just the way it is. I said before, me and Laura work Pokemon leagues. Laura runs Pokemon leagues. We're seeing so many more fakes now, and we're having to go through with kids and parents and explain to them which cards are fake, why they can't bring them to league. It is really saddening.
For me, it's really interesting, Dan, because we have our fun on the podcast and we talk a lot about, how little I know about the cards I own. And I have to tell you, I have not been exposed to fake cards to my knowledge to this point. And it's because, as you know, I'm not opening boxes, as you know, my sets are being prepared for me, etc. But I have to believe that it would be very difficult for me to spot a certain amount of fakes. And it's just because I don't handle the cards enough to be able to understand them. And yet everybody would expect that I would know. And just like you guys have an underlying presumption that folks, for the most part, are going to know when they see them or when they receive them or whatever. But there's so many new folks coming into the hobby all the time, and so many folks that aren't necessarily comparing to what a book is, or whatever it has in it says or shows, or a card in their hand they can compare to. So for me, I'm just saying, I think it's not as, I think it might be more difficult for people to, in general, to spot some of this stuff than you might realize. Just because, again, if you're not routinely inspecting, you're not going to build that knowledge base to be able to look at the cards going forward. So,
well, a lot of the fakes we see, it's not like where you just compare it and it has all the right information and you say, oh, it's the card stock that's wrong. Most of the fakes that go around are just golden versions of cards that never had golden versions. They look all wrong. They have 10,000 HP rather than 250. They do 1,000,000 damage, stuff like that. A lot of the fakes are just ones where as soon as you know just a little bit about Pokemon, you would spot it by looking at it. That's what the majority of fakes are that go around.
Yeah. I mean, it really is. It's very sad, though. I mean, it really is
it
for
is.
us. Anything that creeps in, and we've got to always be on the lookout for what the next criminal scam is behind it. So it's really tough. Yeah.
So that was all the comments from the video, but I did want to give a quick shout out to a guy called Jack, whose name is BizCashCards on Instagram, because I actually got a message from Jack asking what building my card show was in a couple of days ago. Jack actually came along, played in one of the tournaments Laura was running, and met in person, and he was saying he was really enjoying the podcast and stuff too. He says we're doing a very good job.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. Yeah. Nice.
So that is going to be all the comments, or do you have any extra comments you wanted to give a shout out to that you've received?
I do not. Other than just the folks, saying that, what the only comment I got one from Marston, and he just said, you know what, you gotta not worry about that. He said the content continues to be amazing. He loved the World Show, and don't worry about the numbers; they'll come. He understood how we love more numbers and more followers, but he feels like with the dedicated few that we have, and that it will grow over time by word of mouth and some of the things that we're showing in the podcast. So I hope that's the case, especially after the next ones.
Yeah, that is the hope. All right, well then, if we're done with comments, let's jump into a very David-led episode today.
All right, I'm ready. Here we go. So yeah, we're going to go free format today because I've got a lot to say, way too much to say. I'm going to get annoyed listening to my own voice, but it is going to be interesting. So let's just jump in. So for weeks now, I've been alluding to a special purchase I made several months back, actually. And I'd actually intended to show you what that was, but I needed to sort of see if I could, figure out the right time on the podcast and whatever. Well, guess what? Just a few weeks ago now, not months ago, someone was referred to me. And they came to me and said, I've got some very rare cards that you might be interested in. Well, as you guys know, my collection has almost everything, but luckily for me in this particular case, this was one of the few sets of cards I actually still didn't own. So we started talking, this gentleman and me, and we get to know each other a little bit. And basically, he's offering me these cards. There's different conditions of the cards and stuff. You guys know that I don't really get into grading, but when cards are graded, and that's the only way that I can obtain them, then I have to look at grading as something that I have to do. It's a necessary evil. Take and buy a graded card, and then I have to start considering, well, do I want an 8, 9, or a 10, and am I willing to pay the extra prices if it's available? I'm not a huge fan of, 8s, 9s if I can get a 10, just because I understand later on in life I might have to resell these things, even though the bulk of my collection is probably 9s or 10s, although not graded, and there's probably a few 8s because it's still near mint to mint. So he's offering me the cards, talking about different options and stuff, and 8s, 9s, 10s, and they're, whatever few are available, and they're very expensive. These are not inexpensive cards. While we're talking about all this, and I'm getting to know him a little bit, and these discussions are going on, I'm also finding out there's certain things he likes to acquire as part of his kind of collection or sales strategies and whatever he's doing. So what happens? Well, we made a deal. And I'm hopeful that you're going to hear about this as we go on, that whenever you do make a deal yourselves, that you're both happy with the outcome of it. He might think he got me in the deal, like not rip me off, but feels like he got more value than I did. And I might feel like I got more value than he did. Or either one of us might feel we got an appropriate amount of value, or neither one of us might actually care, right? It doesn't matter if you're doing something when you're making a purchase or acquisition or trade, as long as you're happy with it. And every person has their own ways and viewpoints for reviewing the transaction for their own satisfaction. So how did this deal work? Well, kind of complicated, and it's in the works. And that's why you're going to hear why I'm in a hotel room right now. But number one, I sent this person some money. Number two, he sent me some cards. Number three, I agreed to transition some merchandise in a vehicle across the country. Number four, he agreed to assist me in doing something with that merchandise where essentially I would get something from it and he would get something additionally, or the remainder. And that's, I don't know my numbers, but I'm on 5. But that's essentially what the end was. He would assist me in transitioning the merchandise, and then the final piece would be I would get a piece of it and he would get the other piece, and that's the end of the deal. Now, why am I telling you this now? Because yesterday was the first piece of the cross-country trek that we're taking to consummate this deal. By the way, I haven't been able to drive in a car by myself for any length of time since I was about 18, 19 years old. For whatever reason, my motor runs very, very strong, and my energy level is pretty strong and quick. And so when I sit down for any length of time, and especially behind the wheel of a car, I am asleep. So my wonderful wife, who just turned 60, thanks, Maddie, for wishing her happy birthday, she agreed to follow me as we walked out of the house yesterday and said, are we completely off our rocker? We both looked at each other and said, yes, we're completely out of our minds. Here comes Pokemon again. And so we started our cross-country trek. And so we're 500 miles across the country in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I'm in a hotel room doing the podcast with Dan because I didn't want to do the podcast. I'm like, Dan, I got other things to worry about. And he goes, David, don't make me fly to California and sick Laura or the dogs on you. Darn, Laura and the dogs, like an enforcement team. I don't know what to do. Dan, would you really have come after me if I had not done this podcast?
Oh, definitely. We've tracked you down.
See that?
Made you record it.
Yeah. So I didn't have any choice. So I brought the laptop, I turned on the Wi-Fi, and here we are. And depending on how this goes, I've got another several hundred miles to go, another 2 days of driving. This is Tuesday morning, but Thursday we are supposed to do this deal, of which I'll tell you a bit more about once it's consummated, because I'm not a big fan of jinxing myself in the alternative. So if all goes well, we don't get killed or mugged or scammed, then in the next podcast, I am going to show you what we received from doing this deal. And if it goes well, it's going to be 2 of the rarest sets of cards that have ever been seen on camera. So please tell yourself, please tell a friend, please make sure to tell a forum that I'm not just making this stuff up. I don't just give you one of those clickbait things and go, like this, like, oh, it's coming. No, it's coming. It's coming. And at the worst case in the next podcast, since part 2 of the deal, I already received one of the sets of the rarest cards. You're going to get to see that no matter what. So very, very excited about this. It's unbelievable. It's a bit risky. I'm going to take feedback from you guys as to whether or not you think when I lay out all the details of the money that was spent and what was traded for and what was done, did I make a good deal or did I make a bad deal? By the way, if you say I made a bad deal, I will block you and you'll never get to watch the podcast again. Okay. So please be honest as you can, but only say positive things. And let me say this at this point as well. Dan and I know, as this was alluded to in the comments earlier, that we owe you a lot more information on the Worlds trip. Cards that were acquired, stories behind the cards that were acquired, other things about that. So we are going to do that. But as Dan said, some of these negotiations, they don't happen overnight, much less in weeks or months. They can take some time. So we are continuing to work behind the scenes to round out the rest of the story. There was but you have to go look on the internet. I just digress, Dan. I have no reason not to.
Yeah.
Back when I was a kid, and you guys are all, 1/4 of my age. So there was a weekly radio show. And if you look up the quote, and now the rest of the story, he would tell the most incredible stories. Then there would be the commercial break, and then they would do the rest of the story the way he announced it. I don't remember his name. And so that's what we're doing. Today is the rest of the story broadcast and the way we're talking about it with this deal and with the World's cards. But it will all be worth you waiting past the commercial break, so to speak. So, all right. So, Dan, I'm going to go on and talk about some more stuff about today's podcast. But do you have any questions so far about anything I said? Was I not clear on anything, Dan? Everyone knows you're coming to get me because I do things in the wrong way. But is all of the rest okay?
I think all of the rest is fine. I think.
Okay.
I mean, we don't want to give away too much right now, since this podcast will hopefully be going up Wednesday, still the day before you do the deal. So while I know a bit more behind the scenes, I don't want to give away anything just yet. We'll save that all for next week once everything is finalized.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, like I said, it's definitely going to be something that's never been seen on video before. So if you're not telling a friend and not watching that broadcast in full and not listening even to this one, which is going to be good, then that's on you. I can't put that on me. I might put it on Dan, but I won't put it on me. Yeah. All right, Dan. So here's the deal. Dan and I talked, and we said, what should we talk about today? And I thought that it might be interesting, since what is going on in all these deals is acquisition of cards. Let's talk about some of our most successful card acquisition strategies. And that's what today's topic is going to be. And I hope you find it really interesting. And I hope that it leads to deeper discussions between us of what some of the things you guys are doing as well that you find successful that you might share with us too. I will say that when I start out on this list, it is not in particular priority order. I tried to put it a little bit, but I've been quite a bit tired in all the, as you guys have mentioned in the last podcast, doing this stuff is not simple. And it's a lot of risk, and it's a lot of money, and it's a lot of tactics and talking. And then my son this week got suspended, his first day back in school after 3 years of being in virtual school. And he started middle school, and he was suspended after like the first week. So that's been fun too. But anyways, I'm here for you guys because you're all like children to me, including Dan, Laura, and the dogs. So here we go. Let's get rolling. No priority order. Things that I think are important to know about card acquisition. Some of them talked about before, but reiterating never hurts. Number one, don't be cheap. Do not be cheap about buying a card that is a valuable card, that is a rare card, not necessarily valuable in price, but that you think there might be a chance you're not going to see that many of going forward. Because typically, if they are more rare and more scarce, and you do see them going forward, they're going to go up in price, especially if the hobby continues to proliferate the way that it currently is. Now, obviously, if this hobby just dwindled and fizzled out, then none of this is really going to apply. But in a growing hobby with as many folks that are involved in all the different dimensions of the franchise, when you see something that's available and you're like, I don't want to spend that extra $500, that extra $1,000. I talk with this about to my buyers all the time. You really don't want to own this champion card, even though you can't find another one, and I'm actually giving you this discount on it or something. You really think it's going to be available again, like for this price, when every other one sold for $2,000 more. So this is their opportunity to extend themselves a bit financially to make a purchase that hopefully they'll feel great about down the road. I'm going to give you one story. I'm going to give Dan an opportunity to also maybe give a comment or two on things he might feel falls into this category or experiences he's had. But I heard a story about from Worlds, okay? So this is actually information that was confirmed. And you're going to find out as we talk more about Worlds, this past Worlds in 2023, that there were a lot of rumors going around that were not true at all. So you really have to be careful of all that. But this is a confirmed story that I know happened. As you know, these trophy cards, there's only about 6 of each of them that are available. So you'd think the 3 and 4 trophies, which aren't maybe they're not as desirable as a 1 or a 2, technically, they're still as limited. They're still as limited in supply. Somebody jumped up and bought one of those trophy cards for about, I don't know if it was the 3 or the 4. I'm sorry, I can't remember that, but it was a roughly $35,000 purchase at Worlds. And that person sold that card 2 or 3 days later, immediately after, for $66,000. Now, if that person had thought, I'm not going to pay a penny past 30 for that card, and didn't extend themselves to 35, this is just an example for you, they would have lost out on A, the ability to possibly own that card, and B, the potential profit they made in selling that card. This is an example. I have tons of them, which I'm not going to get into, but over the course of years where I've just said, look, I know how rare this card is. I want to put it in the collection. I'm not going from 0 to 5,000. I'm going from 4,200 to 5,000 because I've got to spend 4,200 at minimum for it. And I bought the card and spent a little bit of money, and now the card's worth 10 or 15 or 20,000 or something because I have it in the collection and because they're so hard to find. So number one, don't be cheap with cards that are valuable, scarce, and you think you might not see necessarily for a while again. Dan, any kind of stories like that particular topic that resonate with you, something you might be able to allude to?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of it because I've had people talk to me, especially over the past couple of years, saying stuff like, "Oh, how did you build your collection?" You know, people try and say, "Oh, you've made great investments on these Pokemon cards," and I always say the reason that I have a collection which is worth so much more than I actually paid for it is I wasn't investing in these cards. I was purchasing these cards for myself. If you go into Pokemon collecting thinking, oh, this has to be an investment, you're going to miss out on so much stuff. Because when you're thinking about something as an investment, you're going to be looking at that, oh, well, I can't add this extra $2,000 because I need to think about my profit margins in the future. If I was thinking about profit margins, I would not have bought half the stuff that I have. Like, we've talked about the trophy cards before. People know I have a set of half art trophies. If I was viewing those purely as an investment, I wouldn't have paid the money I did, because at the time it didn't seem like, you know, they were going up in value. What I paid was the market price at the time, maybe a little bit more. Another big one is the 2010 run. I have the full stamped run from 2010 of top 32 up to finalist. And at the time when I bought that, someone even commented that I paid the person price, because it was known at the time that you were the guy who would pay what was said as more than these cards are worth. And I paid about what you paid for the same set. Obviously, you got yours in with the number 1 trophy, so it doesn't balance out quite as cleanly, but I paid about what you would have been expecting to pay. And now it's worth 10, 20 times what I paid for it. But if I'd been viewing that as an investment, no way am I buying that card or that set. And that's just the way it is. Like, basically everything I own would not have been purchased if I was purchasing as investments rather than just purchasing as a collector.
Right. Yeah. And that's tremendous perspective. I didn't really put it in that way, but I think that's really important to restate as well, that all of the time when I was buying things for my collection, I was buying for the collection. I wasn't buying for investment. I like to think behind the scenes a little bit, you know, just because, you know, I need to keep my marriage alive, that it's going to be a good investment. And so maybe I articulate that, and fortunately things have worked out. But the bottom line of what we're talking about here right now is card acquisition, and card acquisition for collecting. So Dan, those are very good comments. I appreciate them. All right, I'm going to move into comment number two. I mean, to strategy number two, or thought number two, which is be creative when you're making deal making. So I'm going to try to keep my examples just minimal because I've got a few of these points to get through, and I've got to get back on the road driving towards where am I going today? I guess I'm driving towards Amarillo, Texas today because that's important. It's a good old song, country song. When you're my age, you know all the old country songs. We were driving through the native lands yesterday, the Indian reservations, and it was so cute to listen to the radio stations. Being this is the native land radio station, and it was all very old country music. So I enjoyed that a lot. All right, number two, creativity and deals. Be creative. So here's what happened with this deal that I'm involved with right now. The gentleman said, "I want this much money." There was money number one. Then he said, "But if we switch out this card for an 8 to a 9, I want this much money." That was deal number two. And then he said, "Well, I want, if I switch out that card and we go to a 10, or let's say I give you a bunch of 10s, I want this much money." At that point, we're basically talking about my retirement has come to an end and I'm going to be working until I'm about 80 years old. So we started talking about creative strategies towards where maybe my capital outlay wouldn't be as much, but I could still own the cards. And maybe he would get something in return that he would own that he wasn't necessarily looking for, just under the heading of money. So again, he has an open mind about these things. I've been doing this my whole life. I mean, I've been literally making these deals in some form for over 40 years. I have a tremendously open mind. We don't shut anything down. Would you ever be interested in listening to this? Sure. Tell me about what you're thinking and let me see if it rings something of interest in my mind. The worst I can say is no. So creativity in all things makes a big difference. By the way, and I'm going to lead on to this in the next 3 points, if the person you're dealing with is unwilling to be creative, then all the creativity in the world on your part doesn't make a hill of difference. Doesn't mean a hill of beans. There's not an anthill. Something with a hill. Put a hill in your thing and stick it in there. The thing is, if they don't want to do it, you got to move on. You're either going to pay the cash price of whatever the outrageous amount was, and I'm going to ruin my retirement, or I'm going to have to move on. So we're going to talk about the idea of moving on. Sometimes the best laid plans don't work out, and you just have to move on. Dan, anything in the creativity part?
No, I think you pretty much covered all of that one. I guess most of the stuff I've done hasn't been that creative when I've been making purchases. I think the creativity ends up mattering a lot more when you're into these higher end purchases where there's a lot more wiggle room, a lot more pieces can move in and out.
Okay, but also I would say that even trading, right? I mean, trading is inherently the creative way to acquire things. It's
True.
just a matter of how many levels in a trade happen and what someone's looking for. And well, like, so you think, well, I would never accept Japanese stuff because I'm an English card collector, but if I can get maybe enough value in getting some Japanese stuff in trade, and then I end up selling that off somewhere else to make some money. So again, sometimes it's no different than, for those of you that are sports enthusiasts, you have a 2-team trade. Sometimes we have a 3-team trade or 4-team trade. And then we have a 3 or 4-team trade with draft picks and cash. So, you can go as deep as you want into these things, but if you want something badly enough, pursue all angles until the seller says, "No, I won't allow you to go any further," and be creative, and it might work out in your favor. All right, so next one, don't pressure. Forget pressuring anybody to do anything. Pressure is not your friend. Pressure makes you look bad. Um, and pressure to me is not a good karma thing. So whether or not there was times when Dan would escort me to a junior or senior or masters winner at Worlds, and we would talk about acquiring their cards, I would not say, "You need to do this. Let me do this. Come on, come on, come on, come on." I would say, if this is comfortable for you and something that is of interest to you, we feel like we'd be making you a tremendously fair offer, and I'd really appreciate your consideration. And that goes to anything that you're doing with any seller, because we want deals ultimately that are good for everyone involved, that they both see as positive and they don't walk away feeling ripped off or whatever, because ultimately that's going to affect your reputation, which we're going to get to in a minute. So not everyone is going to be willing to make those deals. Not everyone is, going to respond and it's going to be a good deal for everybody. If it's something where you don't feel it's beneficial to both parties, again, I encourage you to move on. There were, let me give you a quick business example. If in the beginning of my career, I had to do what was called a lot of cold calling to try to acquire clients for my financial advisory practice. Hello, Mr. and Mrs. Jones. My name is David Person. I work over at Merrill Lynch, now RBC. And I'm wondering if you might have any, issues financially that I might be able to sit down and do a complimentary analysis on things on your plate right now. If those people were like, no, we have no interest in you, you know that some sellers will continue to have that discussion and they'll push, but come on, but why not? But shouldn't you? No, there's too many other folks, opportunities, deals, people, potential clients, sellers out there where you can just move on. And another example would be referrals. In the same vein of business, um, there's a saying that, oh, it's so important to ask people for referrals. So let's actually, since that's interesting when it came out of my mouth, let's talk about that with respect to Dan and me. We are saying out there, hey guys, would you be so kind as to refer this podcast to a friend or two and let them know that we're trying to impart some great information? 99% of you aren't going to do that. Not because you're bad people, because you're busy and you've got other things on your plate. And it's just, you're not referring people. But there's 1 or 2% of you that'll refer us to the whole world. So we can't worry about the 99% in business on this podcast because we don't want you to feel uncomfortable. You're uncomfortable making referrals. You're not like, hey, come on, Jill, listen to this. They're great. You don't want to waste their time. You're worried if we say something wrong. But the people that refer, they're willing to. So find those people that you can feel good about making a deal, that there's no pressure, and work with them. And if that's not the case, then again, don't be afraid to move on. Dan, are we good?
I mean, I think to add a little story to that, I was speaking to someone at Worlds, a friend of mine, and I was talking about how we were, we're obviously trying to buy the trophy cards we always do, and my friend said, "Oh, I do think it's kind of cool when players just want to keep their trophy cards and they want to keep them forever." And they said, "Oh, I guess it sucks for you guys." And I said, "Well, no, we never want to buy a card from someone who doesn't want to sell the card. All we want to do is we want to make sure that if they want to sell the card, that we get the opportunity to do so. And we never put the pressure on and say, oh, you have to sell this to us right now. We'll always say, here is our offer. Here is our contact information. If you get a better offer, all we'll ask is please come to us, give us the opportunity to counter offer. We might do it. We might have already bought the card by the time they come back to us, anything like that. We never want to say you have to do it now. Obviously it does work out better for everyone generally if it's done at Worlds, but not necessarily in the tournament venue, but like this year, things go smoother if it could be done before we left Japan. Anyone who sold to us this year, if they were still in Japan, if I was still in Japan, if we can get the cards in person, we can do the money transfer in person, always does work out a bit better. But we never want to say, you have to sell this to us today, you have to sell this to us before the end of the event. That's just never going to work, because the last thing you want is you never want someone regretting selling a card to you, because that's just going to hurt you further down the line. I'm sure we'll come on to something in a little bit about, long-term connections versus short-term connections or short-term profit, but you never want someone to think even a week later, oh, I really wish I hadn't sold it to them. I wish I'd had more time to think about it.
Yeah, and I mean, and also makes for better deals, again, because it's not always what each person separately thinks. Well, I guess what I'll say is it's not, each person involved in the deal might think very differently about what's an okay outcome for themselves. And as long as they're both happy with those outcomes, even if they're vastly different, then it ends up being a great deal. But you're absolutely right, Dan. And I think about when you talked about the person that says at Worlds to you, you were talking to, and they said, hey, I think it's great when people just keep their cards. So what if that person took that one step more forward and said, I think it's so great that they keep their cards that, Dan, I'm not going to help you try to acquire the cards. Whereas other people feel very differently and they're say, whatever, well, then that's fine. We don't want to put pressure on that person. We completely understand. But guess what? We're fortunate to have a network of people who are very helpful and considerate and in referring us to some of these winners. And it just goes back to what I said. Don't try to stick that square peg in the round hole. Just move on to the next possible potential opportunity.
Yeah.
All right. A couple other things here. Number one, of the number 12 things. Like I just throw a number one out. Like there's a number one. Why would there be a number one in the middle of number 5, 6, 7, or 8? Number one. Let me no. Okay. I'll just continue. Don't judge sellers for whatever the heck they're doing. Okay. I cannot tell you how frustrated that makes me. I'm in some of these Discord groups where it gets down to being so petty. And so here's an example. Why won't that person sell me the card without shipping? Why do they charge shipping? They can't stick in a dollar envelope? Why do they charge $5 shipping on an $8 card? Well, that's my business, folks. That's what I do because I want every card to be there tracked. I want to make sure there's no issues. I want to have no complaints. By the way, they're not talking about me in this instance. They're talking about somebody completely different. But it frustrates me that these folks will say, if you need an $8 card or a $22 card to finish your collection, buy the darn card and don't worry about the extra $4 you're going to pay in shipping because you sure are articulating enough how much you needed it. And then you're frustratingly laying out this case for why they shouldn't do you and how they must be such a blanky blank. Forget it. Stop telling people how to do their business, accept what it is, accept that you could do your business, they're your cards as you want to, and leave that alone. That's just not it doesn't help you be successful in any of this. Sometimes you got to pay what you got to pay to get the card. And if it's an extra $5 in shipping, then that's what it is. Dan, anything there?
I mean, I think that just links back into the idea of moving on if something's not right. You know, if that seller is charging the shipping and you don't want to pay that, you're never going to get anywhere by just constantly talking to the seller, asking them to remove the shipping charge. You either decide to pay the shipping charge or find someone else who's selling the card, you know, for the same price, who doesn't charge shipping. See if that person is out there. There's nothing to be gained from just going on at the same seller all the time.
That's right. And turn the negatives, guys, into positives. Turn the negatives to positives. What if there's no other seller selling that card and that's the seller selling that card and it's a $5 shipping charge? Well, you can turn to a negative and say outrageous shipping, or you can say the positive, I found that card and it's only going to cost me $5 extra to get it to my house so I can put it as part of my collection. Find the positives and not the negatives. I think that makes a big difference as well. So, all right. I have people come to me and say, David, now again, I'm a little more reasonable, I would say, than a lot of the younger sellers, but still, they say, David, sell me that card. Don't sell me that top 8 for $2,000. Would you sell it to me for $1,200 or whatever? Now, it could be anything. It could be a $10 card. If you want someone to give you a discount, I encourage you to give them a reason why. Build a case for yourself. It goes a lot further with me when someone says, instead of, can I get this for a better rate? And then I'll go back out there and I'll take a look and I'll say, well, I'm the cheapest on eBay. I'm the cheapest here. I have the best condition card, whatever. But I can't always track everything that's out there as a competitor's listing. So if you see something, I want to be below it. Now, a lot of sellers maybe don't. I want to sell stuff. So if you see something less expensive that truly is in the same condition, you can build a case and say, David, I'd really appreciate if you consider an offer for, $1,200 because one, there's 2 other sellers out there that are listing the same thing for roughly that price. 2, you can see by the pictures, one is, as good a condition as yours. 3, I'd rather buy from you just because I really do trust you at the end of the day. So be nice, don't expect, build a case in your writing. Say, I appreciate your consideration no matter what you choose, and see if they're a good person, good character, maybe they'll consider your offer. Now, Dan is going to know what I say at the end of this, and you guys should know by now as well. If you can't, don't pressure, don't convince, and just move on. But I cannot tell you how much of a difference it makes to me when someone sends me one of those more verbose emails or messages, and I'm impressed by the fact that they took a little extra time to write it, and I'm much more inclined to do a sale with them at a lower price.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add to that one because I don't sell anywhere near as much stuff as you do. So, good advice, though. Would always agree with it.
All right, now, maybe one of the most important things you're going to find in all of this is how you buy and sell your reputation really does matter. Okay. So we talked about, well, let me tell you about my situation. I've been blessed to have someone in my life for a long while now, and he is the creme de la creme of the hobby. All right, somebody that when people talk about the a reputation, there's just no questioning anything about the reputation. Everybody knows that, he's as straight as the day is long, and that's my good podcast partner Dan Norton. And I believe and I hope that I've cultivated that relationship and he's done the same with me because we've been taking care of each other. We've been true to our words. We've been appreciative of each other. I'm a busy guy. Dan knows that, and I'm on these podcasts more than anything because it's my way of doing a little bit to give back to Dan for all that he's given me through the years of trying to help me acquire these cards, lots of different cards. Now, Dan, appreciating me and what I'm about, he introduces me to other people, and I'm also being introduced myself to other people as well. And we end up building kind of referral network where there's guys that are kind of running around at Worlds. We'll tell you a little bit more. I don't want to get too much into it today, but they're unbelievable to me. The kindness they're exhibiting to go out of their way to try to help little old David in the States continue to maintain his collection as a hobby thing that I do, it's beyond impressive. It's beyond it's just amazing. It's mesmerizing to me. And I'm so grateful for all of it. And that network keeps growing because when I agree to do something with anybody that we sell to or whatever that we buy from, sell to, buy from, whatever we're doing, trade to, I always keep my word. I always get, even when I acquire a card ahead of time and they have to wait for a $70,000 payment or whatever it is, or 30,000 or whatever it might be, they're going to get that money. Everyone knows they're going to get that money. There's nothing in my mind that isn't going to get it to them, and everyone is appreciative of me finishing and finalizing all these deals. You're also not going to see me online ripping people. You're not going to see me selling things where I've watched these Facebook posts where people say, by the way, they're entitled to say whatever they want, but they're like, okay, and here's my deal. Here's my requirements for this sale. Do not try to send me a lowball offer. Do not private message me. Do not this. The tone comes off as so absolutely negative that you start to build that reputation for yourself. And it was amazing to tell you, and I'm just going to allude to this and we'll get into it when we do the World Special. It is amazing for me to tell you that there were a lot of people at Worlds pursuing these trophy cards, more than we've seen before. And there were some outrageous numbers out there. And do you know that despite those outrageous numbers that were being flown around, that people were still willing to go to bat and try to help me because they knew that this was going into a private collection, things weren't going to be resold, et cetera, et cetera. And this was a factor of, I believe, the reputation that means so much when you're dealing with things like this.
Yeah, it does come down to what I was alluding to before of short-term connection versus long-term connection. People know that you're going to be doing this for, as long as Worlds is going for the rest of your life. If people are willing to help you now, they can probably still be helping you in 5-10 years if you need it. And, they'll benefit from that too. I'm not saying it's an entirely one-sided thing when people are helping you out. You do help them, but it's a long-term thing. Whereas a lot of these other people who are just coming in, they show up one year, they decide to start throwing money around. Like, maybe they get bored of it next year. Maybe they decide not to come back. If you go and help them, what have you got in the future? It's the same with the people who we know about. We're going around trying to buy these trophy cards this year very quickly, just with the intent of flipping them to you. It's a very short-term thing. It's very focused on, oh, if I get this for this price and I sell it to David, I can make $30,000 right now off David. And I know that if in previous years, if I just picked the air and went, okay, David, we need to start doing this properly. Every connection that I make, you need to give me X amount of money, whatever. For my middleman fee, I'm charging you this for my time, anything like that. Sure, for that 1 year, you'd probably have paid it. And then the connection ends. Then we aren't doing this anymore because you're just like, oh, well, Dan's just someone who's looking to make money off me. We're not going to go down that route. But just in terms of things you've gifted me, helped me buy, I've made more money from you than probably anyone else who's flipped cards to you because I've made that long-term connection. It wasn't in one go. It wasn't like a crazy, oh, this weekend I've made this amount of money. It's been over the years, but time to money, I've probably got more from you than anyone else just because I've been willing to make that long-term connection. I've been willing to do the stuff where, on one certain Worlds weekend, maybe we have a bad run. Maybe I don't get anything that Worlds, but then it pays. Things happen the next Worlds, and I get extra stuff. Or throughout the year, stuff happens. It is all just fully about that long-term thinking versus short-term thinking. If you're in the hobby for a long time, I hate using the phrase "the hobby." If you're in this for the long haul, then you have to worry about your connections and stuff. Don't worry about the short term. What can I do on this weekend? Can I brag about my one big sale this weekend? You have to think, how will people now view me next year when I want to do that? How are people going to view me in 5 years' time? It all comes down to that.
And don't forget those people. I mean, I think that's really an important part as well. I know in the back of my mind, even for folks who haven't received something as a gift from me or a thank you or whatever, I know who still is needing to receive certain things, whether or not that's a financial thing or some cards. I know all the way back to when on my website, I was doing box openings and I couldn't get any traction doing the box openings. I couldn't get even people to buy Evolving Skies packs. So I couldn't sell full boxes. And I still have 4 or 5 people who I owe packs to. And I've told them they will be compensated. And for their patience, not only will they be compensated, they're not going to get 4 or 5 packs. Maybe they'll get a box. So
Yeah.
I don't forget the people that have taken care of me, whether that's purchases or whether that's kind references or whether or not that's just trying to go out and hustle cards down for me. And so those relationships count a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna transition from what Dan said to all of you now. You might think, but David, you need a whole network or whatever of people to do this because you're going all over to bigger cards, more expensive cards. How many times do you guys look on Facebook and see where people say, tell me about references or I can supply references? You should be compiling a list for all of those people that are willing to go to bat with you for you. I see it in Discord all the time. They'll have a reference channel in a Discord platform. And so that way, when somebody is maybe questioning whether or not you're a person they're willing to sell to, you could say, I want you to talk to Johnny, Jimmy, Jackie, Jan, all these things, write down all of these names and give them a one piece thing and say, please contact any of these people. And they'll tell you, I'm really good about keeping my word, et cetera, et cetera. So reputation goes along with references and allows people to vet you and feel more confident doing things with you and for you as well.
Yeah, I mean, when we get into the Worlds one, there is going to be a story for one of the cards that was purchased this year at Worlds would not have happened without good references because it was a case of they wanted a bank transfer rather than PayPal, and it was about timings of money clearing and whether money could clear before we all left Japan. And like I said, we'll go into more detail on that later, but it was a sale that 100% would not have happened without this reputation you have and these positive references from previous sellers.
Yeah, that's I want to make sure we cover all that when we get into that, Dan. So, and the final part of all this is for this little piece is don't let success change you. So, people know me. I don't ever want to be any different than I've ever been. I want to be kind to people. I want to be considerate. I want to be appreciative. And wow, so he's got the most comprehensive English language collection in the world. Who cares? It's a bunch of cardboard sitting there in some vaults, and every once in a while you look at it. Every once in a while you spend too much money and you and the wife fight about it. I mean, every once in a while, somebody makes you do podcasts about it, but it doesn't change who I am. I don't want to change who I am. So success should still be okay with humility alongside it. And the more humble you stay, the better your reputation stays as well. And you look for good deals, like we said before as well. All right, other couple things. If you can get off eBay, get off eBay. You're trying to acquire cards. If you can get off eBay, get off eBay. Now, what I'm going to say about that is be discreet. eBay doesn't want you to get off eBay. So when you see something for sale on eBay and they're like, you need to buy it on eBay, you can't just go to a person and write a message and say, could we get off of eBay and you go find me out there? Because if you get off eBay, you're going to save yourself some money. You might be able to get a better deal. You're going to save certainly the fees that the seller is going to charge. You might save the sales tax. Well, you're not going to save the fees, but the seller is going to save the fees. You're going to save the sales tax. And you'd be interested to know, for a lot of you that may not know, most of you do know, that PayPal's got pretty good protection as long as you're using PayPal goods and services. Do not use PayPal friends and family. I buy mostly through PayPal friends and family because of my reputation. And that's not simple. But I can talk with people about who I am and what I bought, and I can try to craft a little bit better deal doing it that way. And after they sell to me PayPal friends and family, I say to them, don't you ever, ever, ever do that again. If it's not me, you sell PayPal goods and services, because you have to be protected if you let something go. And all of us have had that horror story where we've done something on friends and family and it's not worked out. You have no recourse. It's just like sort of giving a loan. So if you're able to get a seller off of eBay and get to the PayPal platform, look at doing goods and services. Don't go friends and family, but you say something like, "Hi, I'd like to talk to you about your card in more detail. Maybe the card condition, or some other opportunities with you, whatever. Do you have a social media? Are you on social media? Are you on other platforms?" That's usually how I started, and that will often get us off. Or I'll just look for their name. A lot of them have common names that if they're more than just a small seller, you can find them on Instagram or Facebook, and you say, "Hi, I saw you on eBay. Are you this person?" Now, again, remember what we said through this whole podcast, the move on. If they say, "I'm sorry, I do not sell off eBay," you say, "Thank you very much. I appreciate your response," then. And that's it. And that disappoints me many times, but I do not pressure or push forward. But if you can get off eBay, you'll make better deals. And that kind of thing. Now, I will say one thing to the sellers there that are listening that come off of eBay. If you come off of eBay to make a sale on a private platform or whatever, Facebook or whatever, I encourage you to leave your merchandise on eBay for a bit of time. So you have a card, it's selling for $100. You come off eBay and you sell it to the person for $80, and you go to eBay and you hit end listing. I encourage you not to do that if there's been any communication on eBay between you and the person who wanted to buy the card. Take the card and put it out there, change the price. Change the price from $100 to $1,000 so no one will buy it. And then remember to take it off a week later. But this is the way that you won't have a situation where eBay will say, "Well, we saw a communication and then you listed it, you ended the listing immediately." You don't want to be flagged for that. So this is just another little trick that I've seen happen over the years that you might be beneficial for you. Dan.
Well, I don't do any selling on eBay really, so I don't have too many stories or anything on that one. I buy a little bit on eBay, but generally I buy privately now. I buy through Facebook groups and just having connections with people quite a lot. There's very little I actually buy on eBay.
Okay. Um, and as far as connections on Facebook and stuff, just want to make sure I get to that. I've got to get to that in just a second. So all right, let's move on. So consult the experts. You have sitting in front of you right now one expert and one guy who's got a big collection. So don't be afraid to ask us. If you're trying to acquire something, You think, should I acquire it? Do you think it's going to be a good investment? Do you think it'd be a good addition to my collection? I mean, it's really got to be your choice first if you love something enough to make it a part of your collection and want it. But I try to help people whenever. David, do you think this is too high a price to pay? David, do you think there's more of these that are going to be available? Dan and I are telling you to try to be patient on the staff cards for 2023 because I've seen all of those. I haven't watched staff that much, but I've definitely seen the promo packs and a lot of those things falling in price the last week or two. So if you can consult experts or folks that you build a network of trust in, do that whenever you think it's going to be beneficial. Now be careful. You do not want to deal with people who you realize are just saying things for their own benefit. Oh, the staff card for 2023 is going to be the rarest thing in the world because maybe they bought up every single one and that's what they want you to think. You can't do that. But you have to look for unbiased, both sides of the equation. Hey, this is why it could be great. This is why it might not be good. But this is what I suggest you do because I think it might be better than worse in the long run. So don't be afraid to get smarter and wiser and get some coaches in your corner. As all of you know, there's leadership conferences and you could go listen to Tony Robbins or you could go get some education from your work. People like Laura probably do that all the time. Dan, not so much. Dan, we're going to get you a job. I swear to God, just hang in there, buddy. The podcast's going to take off. You deserve to work in the hobby only. You're doing a fantastic job, but a leadership conference wouldn't be a bad thing. So you got a lot of expertise out there that you can turn to as long as it's not biased. So build your support network, build your expertise network. I'm starting up a Patreon. I'm going to announce next week where I'm charging somewhat over $100 a month to try to train all of you where I can. It's not really about training you. It's about getting the Patreon money. Of course, Dan, I'm kidding. I'm not starting up a Patreon. I'm not asking for money. Jump into my DMs. Ask me whatever the heck you want. I try to give you some good advice, okay? So that's all I got to say about that. But sometimes having some experts involved, even just the collaborative effort like Dan and I have between each other makes a huge difference in what we're trying to do and figure out what we want to do.
Yeah, I will say I very much try not to say to people, I think this is what you should do. I'm always open to answer questions on how rare is this? Have we seen sales of this before? What's the story behind this? I'm always willing to give people information. When giving my opinion, what I will try and do is I will try and maybe base it off, related things. If there's been recent sales, I will always try and quote those. I very much try not to say to people, oh, I think you should be doing this, because obviously a lot of collecting is going to come down to your own personal tastes. Like there is no one out there is going to have the same collection. If everyone was collecting purely for themselves and not for investment, everyone's collection would be completely different. But I understand that there are people who want to go into this for different reasons, but that's why I try to just stay on the information side of answering questions where I can. Obviously if people say, look, if it were you, what would you buy? I will say, if it were me, I'd do this, but I would never say that's what you should be doing as well. The only person who I say you should be doing this to is you, David, because I think we've known each other long enough that I think you can trust me when I tell you what to do, and I know that you're stubborn enough sometimes that you won't just do it yourself, so I'll just tell you have to do this. But people know I do have a Patreon. My information and my advice is not in any way locked behind that. My Patreon is just to help support me for making the videos and stuff that I do. Any information you want, if you're on my Patreon, great, you can reach out there. If you're not, you can reach out on Instagram. Anywhere else, I will see the message and I'll get back to you as soon as I can.
Yeah, and I think that's those are great words of wisdom, that you're not trying to advise people, and you can't. I mean, they have their own things, but sometimes when Dan and I realize there's a real actual answer to your questions that we should push you towards for your own benefit, then we would do that just to be smart. But as far as choices, that's right. You have to kind of let people navigate their own circumstances. So
yeah, and the thing to remember, anyone who is selling cards, especially if they're selling cards as a living, they cannot be unbiased. They are always going to have some level of bias when telling you what to buy, especially if they're then locking their advice behind a paywall where you have to pay so much a month to have a chat with them. If someone is selling, if you say like, oh, should I buy this card or this card, and the person you're talking to is actively trying to sell one of those cards, they can never truly give you an unbiased opinion on what you should buy. You know, I mean, let's say David is selling a card, and you say, David, I want one of these two cards. He can obviously unbiased say, well, this one that I'm selling has X amount of copies in circulation, last one sold, blah, blah, blah. The one I don't have has X amount of copies, etc. But there is always going to be a bias if you say to someone who's selling a card, should I buy from you or should I buy this completely different card? And, I know David will always try to be as unbiased as he can. I'm not so much talking about David here, but I guess it does still apply. You have to, at least in your own head, acknowledge that bias. I'm not saying don't ask David. I'm not saying don't ask these other people. You just, in your own head, have to know that their answer may be affected by the fact that they are selling one of the things you're asking about.
And this goes back to what you said, Dan, about short-term versus long-term. So I am very unique in this whole situation. And I'm not, again, I have no arrogance about me. I just don't care. I just try to be real. I am not biased about anything. I mean, I literally, my daughter and her partner, they'll get into fights and they come to me for advice and he's waiting for me to support my daughter. And all I'm doing is giving an objective case for why either one should be listening to the other one, why somebody might be wrong, somebody might be right, whatever, while they kind of work out a conflict. If you are objective and unbiased in everything, and that's your take, you can actually be objective and unbiased in whatever the heck you're advising people to do. The short-term, long-term thing is, I don't care about the short-term. Happen to have done well financially for myself. I happen to have crafted a wonderful life that, is not full of much stress unless I'm driving across the country in 3 days and about 20 hours worth of driving. That's not stressful because the wife is in the car with me. What am I saying? She's like, wife's in the car with me for 20 hours? It's the most stressful thing I've ever done. Should find out how much fighting you can do in 20 hours. No, I'm not talking about you. Go back in the bathroom. Okay. I'm in a hotel. Sorry. So anyways, so here's the thing. I am going to be unbiased because I don't need your last dollar. I want to get it if it's a fair deal for both of us. But if there's a better price out there on something else, I want you to go buy it. And if I've got, by the way, I'm going to add a little caveat in here. Consignment changes things dramatically as well because you've got other people involved. You're selling their merchandise. So, you could argue there's 100 different iterations of what's bias or not. You just got to do the right thing. And because I'm not a youngster and because I don't need that extra dollar to pay my next, to fuel my need to be greedy or to fuel my need for more people to watch me and pay my $40 or $50 or $100 Patreon thing, or to fuel my need to be looked at as the industry expert or the hobby expert, I just don't care. I want to give great advice, unbiased advice, good deals to people, but you're not going to always encounter that in sellers. So you have to be careful. And that's what Dan is saying. And that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think that's maybe a better way of putting what I was trying to say.
Yeah, no problem. I get it. Thank you. Were trying to say, I get it. So I'm going to just leave it because you weren't going to throw me under the bus with some of the others. Okay. All right. So I'm getting towards the end here. Use your eBay searches. Stay involved. Stay involved. Stay involved. Learn something about whatever it is you're searching for. So what I mean is, of course, you can set searches on eBay. You can use some of those, Boolean stuff that we talked about, the minuses and the pluses and all that stuff to have a way of having these things pop up. Look at them quickly. You're going to hear the importance of what that did for me to get this entire deal done just a few months ago. But use those searches to continue to build an expertise on your end for what it is you're looking to acquire, what condition you're looking to acquire, and differences in the way that sellers are articulating or showing their conditions, differences in prices, differences in their flexibility, look at their feedbacks, all this kind of thing to try to find deals for yourself. Now, I'm talking about eBay right now, but this might not just be eBay. This could be Facebook as well. So when I was starting out in my career as a financial advisor, there was a book, I think it was by a firm called Acorn. And their whole philosophy was don't just follow the whole herd. Don't just invest like everyone else does. I don't know if you guys realize, because a lot of us are, kind of dialed into whatever the specifics of what we're dealing today, and we don't open those horizons a little bit. It is amazing to me how much stuff is for sale out there. It's mind numbing. I go on Facebook just now for kicks to watch. So you'll see, I'm going to give you an example. There's like a Neo Genesis set. It's a good group for acquisition is Burbank. Tell me what is Burbank City Pokemart, Dan?
Yeah, Burbank City Pokémon is the store one, and then there's Burbank City, which is kind of like the discussion group.
Okay. So Burbank City Pokemart, I just love looking through it to see what people are selling. And you'll see stuff that's in great condition and stuff that's not in great condition. But let's say for a moment we get out of the topic of the new stuff, because I think there's some risk in the new stuff, at least in the short term for sure. Booster box cases are now produced more than they ever have been. So you can buy this case at 600, then it's 580, then it's 560 for a 6-box case of Obsidian Flames or whatever the last one was, or whatever, Paldea Evolved. So maybe you want to do that, and maybe that's how you're building your business. But maybe more as a collector, you want to see about buying some things that might be good for your collection or might go up in value later on, maybe because they're more limited. So I saw a set out there. You can go look for it. Somebody's selling a Neo Genesis set. And again, you have to comb through the condition. That makes a big difference. Really make sure it's what it needs to be. And that whole set for everything, I think entirely is like $6,000 or something. Now, I'm not going to tell you if that's a good or bad price because I haven't looked in the details. I'm just saying, if you start saying, I'd like to buy that set, I realize how rare that set is. I realize as time goes on and more people come in, I'd like to own it. It's a beautiful set, but I also think it's going to get more difficult to find. Then you start building an expertise in that set and what a good set looks like and what a bad set looks like. And again, if you're into grading, that's a whole different thing as well. But what if you could buy that set? It was really good condition cards, and then you were into grading and you could send it to get graded yourself and get a bump on the values for your own self. Well, you have to, again, the bulk of people right now are not looking for a Neo Genesis set, but maybe they should be. Because maybe when time goes on, it's sort of looking at these sets that have the reverse hollows in them. You can't find them anymore. And ultimately, if there are collectors that try to go back in the collecting world, there are going to be potential opportunities. So don't follow the herd and just everybody's got to buy Paldea Evolved, so I'm going to buy Paldea Evolved. Don't try to buy something the first time you look at it. Search and review and compare and do it day after day. The more time you put in, the better your results will be. And be creative and kind in your discussions with people, because here's what's happening. They're not selling that stuff. There's too much of it out there. So you just got to find one person that's at 6,000 that's willing to go 4,000 because they need the money for the wedding or they need the money for the car that broke down. And you just made yourself one heck of a nice deal. Those are my ideas regarding that. I do it in both eBay, my searches that are saved, and also in Facebook. Just enjoying. You can put searches in Facebook as well. In the groups, go into the group and put a search at the top, and it's just a good way of staying current. One thing I'll mention just as an aside before I let Dan give our comments on this last thing is, I had somebody tell me this past week that here's what they've been doing, and if you think this is something that might be beneficial for you, take a look. You guys know about this whole thing, or some of you don't, that CGC has said if you have 9.5s in their slabs, you can send them back in to get 10s. So maybe it's a $5 charge, something Dan will tell us in a minute. So you could be scooping up, if you thought it was beneficial, if you thought a 9.5 moving to a 10 would get you a higher value on a card, you could be out there just doing searches for CGC 9.5s in any particular card, trying to buy them up and sending them to CGC to get a 10 in hopes it's going to increase value. I do not know if it's going to increase value for you. Could depend on the timing, could depend on supply, could depend on the card itself, obviously, but just something else to think about as a way of possibly making money while you're acquiring something as well. Dan.
Well, I think to give a bit more information on what you're saying about CGC, what happened was recently they've completely changed their labels and their grading system. So the labels no longer have the old blue labels. I think we did talk about this a few podcasts ago. They have the black and gold labels now, and basically they've removed 9.5 as a grade, so they're not going to be giving that grade going forward. So on their new grades system, their perfect 10s are still perfect 10s, but their pristine 10s and their 9.5s become pristine 10s, I believe it is, or they become 10s in some way. I think there's enough knowledge and exposure of that now where anyone who owns a 9.5, if they think the 10 is worth more, they're going to send it in themselves. I think if anyone who's selling old label CGC 9.5s now is doing it because they think that it's not going to increase in value by getting the 10.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know when you say there's that exposure, I'm going to debate you just a smidge, only because it's not like CGC would have sent a message or email to every single person that would have ever graded, especially because cards get then traded down the line. And in my experience, there's a lot of eBay sellers or other sellers, Facebook sellers, whoever, that just put listings out there and then they get busy and walk away. They just don't follow it day to day. They just list, and if they wait for a sale, they don't care. They're not a regular time seller. So that's the only thing I'm talking about, Dan. I know what you're saying, but I think there could be situations where, again, I'm not sure it does make a difference, but it might be something to think about. That's all.
Potentially it might.
Yeah. So I only have one more thing, and I'm going to say this. This is my last point. Do not be afraid to lose money from us being a seller if you need to move merchandise or move stuff so you can put some money back in your pocket to go and buy something else. So what I mean by that is you've got a ton of sellers out there for a lot of different stuff. It's becoming more and more competitive, especially with the newer merchandise. And so if you're buying, let's go back to a case just because they're so readily available. So if you're buying a case of Paldea Evolved and it was 600 and now it's 580 and now it's 560, and there's a point where you can keep holding your price at 600. I'm going to pretend you paid 600. You didn't. Let's say you only paid 540, but let's pretend for this example you paid 600, and you won't take that $60 loss. You won't take that $80 loss. You just decide you're going to hold it forever, and therefore you're not acquiring something else that you're looking to acquire. Emotions and money don't mix, and that's what I do for a living, financial advising. So, and none of anything I've said today, let me caveat, I must clarify and stress, there isn't anything that I've said today in this podcast that is to be associated with my financial advisory career. These are all comments, recommendations, and advice based on outside of my purview as a financial advisor. That way nobody slaps my hand. But you should make decisions based on pragmatic considerations, important things to you. And so if you want to be the last one out holding a Charizard UPC collection that they're still available from the Pokemon Center, and you bought it at 120 and you don't want to sell it at 80, then you can hold it forever because that's going to take forever to get back to 120. Or you can say, look, I'm not going to worry about it. I think there's something I could take every $80 with and go buy something else and make some money. So be smart. Invariably in the stock market, what people do is they hold on to they sell their winners because they made a profit, and they hold on to their losers waiting for them to come back. It's completely the wrong way to go. You want to hold your winners because they're making a profit for some reason and continue to go in the right direction, and should profit more if they're still doing the right things as a company, and you want to sell those losers and move that money into something that's going to become a winner. So hopefully all that makes sense.
It does. It makes sense.
Okay. I have nothing else to talk about with respect to my keys for success. Some of them anyways. Dan, do you have anything particular you wanted to talk about?
Probably not, because, I haven't hit the levels of success yet to start talking about that kind of stuff. Not that that stopped anyone else in the hobby of just talking when they're not successful.
Well, I think that's so cute the way you say that, but I'm going to tell you something. For someone that's not achieved the levels of success that you think you haven't, you won't even take $1 million for your collection, buddy. So I'm going to beg to differ highly from you, but that's okay.
No.
I understand where you're coming from. Humility still in control. All right. So thank you. I'm going to just say thank you for letting us go on about that. If you have any questions or comments, please make them. Adding, you can even might put in that might be for you, might be important for you to say. And hey, I think this is another thing you might add next time. If you have follow-up questions, feel free to do that as well. But I appreciate you letting us go free format, and hopefully you got something out of it today. I'm going to end my section on this. Thank you, Dan, for letting me kind of run it today, so hopefully made it a little easier on both of us. But
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you two things because I think there's tons of things that people think everyone knows and they don't know. And I don't know any of this stuff. So I have two quick questions for you. Are you ready?
All right. Yep.
Dan, what's a God pack? God space pack. What's a God pack that everybody refers to?
So a god pack is a thing that some Japanese sets have, and it's where basically every card in the pack is a hit. Japan doesn't do it with every set. They normally do it with some of their special sets. Like they're doing it now with the 151 set, where 151 is a 7 card pack, and normally you get one rare, one rare or better, and one foil. But you can get a very very occasional pack which will have one common, and then it will have 6 ultra rares. The way it's set up with 151 is there's a ultra rare variant of all of the 9 starters from the first set, Bulbasaur, Ivysaur, Venusaur, etc. And you would get 2 full runs, 2 full evolution lines of just the secret rares. They're special packs that are inserted, one in every however many boxes, like probably into the one in the hundreds of boxes or something like that. They're very rare to get. They're the Japanese set that was the kind of equivalent of Crown Zenith that had the Galarian Gallery that we saw. In Galarian Gallery, there's a set of cards 9 cards that form a picture together. In Japan, you could only get those if you pulled a God pack, which has all 9 of them in. There's been previous sets, where they've done it where it's a set with a ton of secret rares. It's a special set. You could pull the very, very occasional pack, which would have only secret rares in it and nothing else. So it is very literally a pack that is a god tier pack. It's got everything in it that you could want. It's the most valuable thing you could hit.
Do you think that those packs are referred to? Sometimes people will take something, and then extrapolate it out. So I feel like I've seen posts where people have a pack that's sitting on a scale, and they're calling it a God pack because it weighs a little more than something should weigh of that series or set. And the implication is that maybe it doesn't just have a single hollow in it or whatever, maybe it has multiple hollows. But because of the set it came from, like one of the old vintage sets, it's very likely it's not literally a God pack by the definition that you just gave. Do you think some of that is going on as well?
Yeah, I think there are people that appropriate terms to try and help them sell stuff. So people who are selling packs like that and saying, "Oh, God pack," they're trying to get the search hit. They're trying to get it so when you type God pack into eBay or into Facebook or whatever, their listing comes up. It's the same way that we'll not get into this in full now, but the same way that people have used master set before. We've talked about we've always used a definition of master set to be everything, including all variants, everything with the original set symbol. But you get people using master set for things that are less than that, things that are just full sets, whatever. And a lot of it is because, as collectors, people want to be able to say they own master sets, but as sellers, they want their listing to appear when you type master set into eBay or Facebook. I think it's a similar sort of thing with this God pack. Using that terminology is because they know people will be searching God pack and they want their thing to pop up.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Second question. I know that, again, everybody's going to think everybody knows this. If I don't know this, then I'm going to bet that there are some people that actually don't know this. So, Dan, what is a claim sale?
A claim sale is they do it on Facebook, and basically what it is someone will say, "I'm running a sale," and it's just they will start posting the comments on their own post, and they just post a picture of a card and a price. And the claim sale is basically just, we're not negotiating the price. This is the stuff I'm selling it for. And it's just, if you want it, underneath you comment on the individual picture and say claim. And that means at the end of the sale, you get everything that you were the first person to say claim on. It's just like, it's a very fast-paced sale. It works for if people have, a ton of smaller items, rather than selling one big card. If they have, hundreds of cards in the like $5 to $10 range, they'll probably just do a claim sale. They'll just post one picture of it at each time and say, this is the price on them. And then people will just hit claim on the ones they want. And then at the end, once they post everything, they'll normally say, all right, we'll leave it up for 12 hours or whatever until everything gets claimed. And then they go through and they just message each person and say, oh, you claimed these 10 cards. This is your total. Send me the money and I'll send you the cards.
All right. So I had absolutely no idea. You're going to now set me straight on a point 3 that I had not intended to discuss. I thought that a claim sale was one of these mechanisms that sellers on Facebook use to get around this lottery thing, the auctioning thing, the things you're not allowed to do, right? Like you get a drawing or something. Is there a term for that that's different than a claim sale that you'll see on a Facebook post?
On Facebook, the groups that do that generally refer to them as waffles.
Spell that?
Like waffle, WAFFLES, like the breakfast food. Because it's one letter away from raffle, because you can't say raffle.
Yes.
So they say waffle instead. That's if you see someone say waffling, like I'm going to waffle this card, that means they're going to raffle it off, and it will be everyone. It's a $10 card. 10 people pay $1, and then they randomly draw it. Claim sale, unless a seller specifically adds some game of chance into it, a claim sale generally will just be a standard sale, just a fast-paced one. Okay.
All right. Thank you for the clarification. Again, I think that those are the kinds of things that a lot of folks, see, but don't necessarily jump into and research. So,
potentially.
So yeah. Okay. So I'm going to add one final comment for me, and I'll let you close it up. I mentioned earlier, we do try, and I try hard to make the content of this beneficial for you guys, and Dan puts a lot of effort into to the podcast and the technical aspects, and not only the research and all the historical stuff, but also the technical podcast of putting this out there. So anybody that feels like they're one of those 100, the 1% that would be willing to refer us out there, please do. Please let people, please post it on a forum, please post it in your Facebook group, that we have these things if you think they're beneficial and for folks to watch and learn from. And with that continued support, we'll just keep rolling and see what we can keep offering to you guys. But the next couple of weeks are going to be absolutely amazing if I get across this country safe and sound. So keep your fingers crossed, keep your hands crossed, keep your prayers for me, and we'll see what we can put together.
Yep. Hopefully everyone did enjoy this one. I say it's a bit different. And in terms of sharing us out there, be sure to check us out on all the social medias, on Twitter, or X as it's now called. We are Koffee Talks Poke. On Instagram, we are Koffee Talks Pokémon. No, we're not. I get that wrong every time. We had to change it. On Instagram, we are Koffee Talks Podcast. TikTok, we're Koffee Talks Pokémon. The TikTok will come at some point in the future when I learn how to do TikTok. And if you are listening to an audio-only version of this, because this will be on Spotify and Apple Podcasts at some point, I promise, then you can check out the video versions at youtube.com/DJ Gigabyte, where I have lots of other videos and stuff too. And DJ Gigabyte is pretty much me on every social media platform. David is dperson1 on Instagram, and either that or David Pokeperson on other places. So check us out there. You can retweet or repost stories and stuff if you want to help us out.
I don't need your housekeeping. My partner's doing a podcast. Be quiet. Sorry, Dan. Go ahead.
All right. Well, I think that's it for today. As I say, hopefully you all enjoyed and you'll continue to join us.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Koffee Talks with Dan Norton and David Person, featuring music by More Than Never and artwork by Laura Norton. A special shout out to all of our Patreon members. Join us again next time.
But they don't want you to.